Ladies and gentlemen, I see the numbers are climbing slowly. I'm wondering if we cannot start because it is now 6:33. I think let us start, and as we talk, more people will hopefully join us. So yes, I'm introducing myself. I'm Professor Ilse Troete. I'm currently the chairperson of the SAAHE Eastern Cape chapter, and a warm welcome from a very cold and wet friendly city this evening. Thank you for joining us for our second webinar of 2024. The topic tonight is the use of game-based learning in health professions education, and we have 4 speakers, all 4 this evening from Nelson Mandela University. Those of you who attended webinar 1 will know that Walter Sisulu presented in webinar 1, and we're going to tell you just now about our next 2 webinars. So a warm welcome from a cold, friendly city this evening. For those of you who are not yet members, please join SAAHE. The website is on the screen. It is a Southern African association, but we also have members from other countries and other, not only Southern Africa, but also other African countries. So if you know of anybody interested in health professions education, please refer them to the website and encourage them to join. It is 200 Rand registration fee, and the registration is done online on the website. The Southern African Association of Health Educationalists' vision and mission statement is quality and resilient South African health sciences educators as leaders for Vision 2030. So it is anybody involved in health professions, health sciences education, who are interested in the science and what is the latest developments in health professions education are welcome to join. Our SAAHE Eastern Cape chapter consists of the members from all 4 universities. From our universities, university myself, Dr. Riaan van der Venter, one of our speakers tonight, Prof. Dalena van Rooyen, our Deputy Dean, and then Mrs. Rosanna Williams. From Rhodes University, Prof. Sue Burton. From Fort Hare University, Ms. Shanae Christians. And then Walter Sisulu University, Dr. Madeleine Mulder. You are welcome to contact any of us. If you're not yet a member, or if you want to know anything more about SAAHE, you are welcome to join, to contact us, and obviously to join SAAHE. We encourage you. Tonight, we are presenting to you a very interesting webinar. The program is on the screen. We're first going to listen to Dr. Riaan van der Venter on game-based learning and overview. That will be followed by a joint presentation. Dr. Teri-Lynne Fogarty and Ms. Celeste Naude is going to talk about Beyond the Screen, integrating game-based learning into health education. And then Mr. Daniel from MC, Daniel Brink is going to finish off with enhancing student engagement through game-based learning, a case study. And then, if there's time left, we're going to have a short question and answer session. We are, however, inviting you to post your questions in the chat box as the presenters are presenting. And after each presentation, we will allow 5 minutes for questions for that specific speaker. We will monitor the questions as they come in, and after each presenter, we will address as many of the questions that we can for that specific topic. But I'm very quickly going to introduce the 4 speakers to you. Dr. Riaan van der Venter is a lecturer and an NRF Y2 rated researcher in the Department of Radiography at Nelson Mandela University. Their professional background, and you can read in radiography, bioethics, health law, tertiary education, and distance higher education. Riaan's research focus, in other words, is quite wide and diverse, but he is establishing himself as a health professions education expert in various fields. So Riaan, we're looking forward to your presentation tonight. Our second presenter is Dr. Teri-Lynne Fogarty from the Department of Pharmacy. She did her PhD in the Department of Pharmacy, but specifically in pharmacy education, and her research interests are pharmacy law and ethics, the practice of pharmacy, and especially she was very involved in the establishment and introduction and presentation of the pharmacy support personnel program in the Department of Pharmacy, which we hope will soon again be active. So Teri-Lynne, we are also looking forward to your presentation tonight. She will be joined by Ms. Celeste, a lecturer and researcher in the field of pharmacy practice in the Department of Pharmacy. Celeste is currently involved in the final year pharmacy degree and also involved in a research elective which focuses on game-based learning. And I know Celeste is a very passionate lecturer to empower students to become lifelong learners, critical thinkers, and also making learning fun for the students. And then last but not least, from our Department of Emergency Medical Care, Mr. Daniel Brink is a seasoned lecturer with 7 years experience at our university. He regularly explores with ways to increase his teaching in the classroom and online through blended learning. And Daniel is also interested in game-based learning, that it is his approach of also in making students enthusiastic about learning. Daniel, also very welcome to this. Colleagues, with that, this is our program for this evening. I'm going to stop sharing now and hand over to Dr. Riaan van der Venter for game-based learning and overview. Once Riaan is finished, we're going to look if there are any questions, and we will allow a short period for responding to questions. Thereafter, we're going to hand over to Teri-Lynne and Celeste, and then to Daniel. And then at the end, if there are more questions that we couldn't answer, we will look at those questions towards the end. Our plan is to finish at 10:30, and less than an hour from now. And our last slide, we will also tell you about our next two webinars and also our AGM. I'm going to stop sharing. Riaan, I'm handing over to you. Thank you.
Prof. Trita, can you let me know if you can see my screen?
We can see your screen and we can hear you. Thank you, Riaan.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar on game-based learning. The purpose of this first few minutes is just to get us all on the same page in terms of what game-based learning refers to, and then looking at potential benefits and challenges so that it makes sense when my colleagues speak about what they actually did in implementing game-based learning, firstly in pharmacy and then in EMC. So my talk will focus on the following three things. It's to give a brief explanation of what game-based learning is, or GBL, what motivates the use thereof in health professions education or education in general, and then to delve into some benefits and challenges of what GBL entails. So when we think of game-based learning, or if we think of our classroom as educators, we always want our students to engage with us, with each other, as well as the content. But sometimes it doesn't happen and they just sit there and they want to be containers to absorb as much of the information that we give them. So then we sometimes need to find other ways to engage them. And GBL, or game-based learning, is one of those solutions that we can actually help students take information and retain it, skills or values or behaviors, and then actually to transfer these into other contexts or multiple contexts to solve particular problems that we then pose to them. So if we think of game-based learning as a concept, we can explain it as a interactive, collaborative, and usually fun learning experience or technique. And it's all underpinned by gamification, which means that the learning activity or experience is designed with gaming principles in mind. And the whole learning experience then takes place through the playing of a particular game, whether it's digital or offline, hard copy, soft copy. There's many ways to do this. And then to actually get students to be involved, you can also add some competitiveness to this so that they work in groups or individually and see who wins the game. Students love this and they would like to play games the times that I've done it in every period thereafter. So what would then motivate us as educators to actually implement game-based learning? I'll look at it from a very theoretical point of view by focusing on the three essential or very well-known theories in education. And the first one is, if we design a game-based learning experience from a behaviorist point of view, the aim of the game would be to reinforce concepts or skills, values, or behaviors, which then also can inform habit forming to shape a particular behavior that we would like from our students. Then if we look at it from a cognitivist perspective, if we use this theory to underpin the learning activity, we focus on challenging learners to think critically about something, to solve problems, or to help them make decisions based on information presented to them in a game. So if we think of escape rooms, would be a cognitivist type of game. And then lastly, social constructivism is ideal for teamwork, working in a team, coming up with personalized solutions based on tools that we have given them in different forms. They then use this as part of the game to solve particular problems for real world type of events. And the bonus of using game-based learning is also that we are actually informing 21st century skills, which is captured in this image quite briefly. It helps students to become analytical in their thinking. They are actively involved in the process and they can solve complex problems. They can think deeply and more meaningfully about it instead of just superficial learning. It stimulates originality and creativity, but also personalized learning. And others would say that it helps them to develop digital literacy skills if it's an online type of game. And then reasoning and problem solving is also a big aspect. If there's group work involved, leadership and social influence, emotional intelligence, flexibility and dealing with complexity, then also become skills that they can learn. So GBL then helps students to develop not only skills that they need relating to content or the discipline, but also interpersonal skills. So what's the benefits then of game-based learning? And I've summarized it to focus on the top 10 benefits that literature speaks about. And probably the one that we would see everywhere is engagement. Game-based learning is known to increase engagement because it requires the student to actively participate, to actually complete the game, and it captures their attention because everybody loves something that looks new, can give them some fun and some increased serotonin levels to then take part in this. And it's also a very immersive experience. Together with increased engagement, increased motivation can happen, especially intrinsic motivation, but there needs to be clear goals and outcomes for this particular game. They need to know what to do so they don't get frustrated in the process, and the game should also not be too difficult. And then if we want to balance intrinsic motivation with extrinsic motivation so that they can track their achievement or progress. We can add rewards or achievements in the form of badges, for example, or leaderboards. And this is then where the competition aspect comes in, because if there's that element, students are more motivated because they want to win. Students are very competitive in that area. Then active learning, linking to engagement, they all participate and usually, depending on what the focus is, can then achieve that goal of the game. They can also develop skills, whether it is skills directly linked to the focus of the game or other interpersonal skills, as previously mentioned. In some cases, depending on the game that they would play, there's immediate feedback that they can get on whether they are right or wrong. And then it gives the lecturer the chance to actually then go over that particular section to understand why certain students or groups picked a particular answer, if we play a Kahoot, and why others went for others, and we can then rectify that. There's also the chance for personalized learning, because games can be adapted to individual learning styles or pace, depending on the games that we have designed, which then gives that personalized learning experience. Through all of these, we can then also link to increase retention of information or skills, which they can then hopefully transfer to other contexts. There's also the social interaction aspect, where if we have multiplayer games or teamwork type of games that we play, students can learn skills like communication, leadership, group dynamics, dealing with complexity and uncertainty, as well as develop some social skills. Games also provides for a safe environment to experiment, and it's also quite risk-free for learning to take place. So students are more inclined to take risks and higher risks, and they can then fail and learn through that trial and error period before they would, for example, go to clinical. And then there's also the real world application aspect to this. Again, depending on the game, many games can simulate real world scenarios, which then helps learners to apply the theoretical knowledge and skills to practical situations. But we know with benefits, there's always challenges, and we need to be realistic about this, and game-based learning is not free from those. So 6 of the more common challenges that we need to be cognizant of if we consider implementing game-based learning in our classrooms. Firstly, resource requirements. Game-based learning involves quite a number of resources, whether it's material or human resources, and it can range from inexpensive games or to very costly ones. And the pedagogical and technical support that you need or that might be necessary needs to be planned for and budgeted for, depending on the type of materials that you need. Also, to develop these games can sometimes be very time consuming if you go for the more complex games. Then integrating it into the curriculum is sometimes another challenge, because you need to align the activities to the educational goals or learning outcomes of that particular module and certain standards that some of our regulatory boards would require. And this can be sometimes challenging and requires careful planning, and it links to the time-consuming aspect of this as well. Then, thinking of the context in which game-based learning is applied, access and equity becomes a consideration, because not all students may have access to the necessary devices or technology to participate, and we don't want to exclude them, because then they don't learn what we would require of them. So when we design the games, we need to be mindful of these disparities and see how we can overcome this. Then there's always the concern of, so how can we make sure that the learning is effective, or that students actually learn what we would like them to learn? This also requires some balance in terms of the design of the game, and setting up the learning outcomes and rules for that particular session. So the effectiveness of game-based learning can vary depending on many factors like game design, learner engagement, and the alignment of the game content with the learning outcomes for that module or learning unit. So the games particularly and meticulously need to be able to keep the learners focused on the task at hand so that they don't stray off. It needs to be carefully designed because sometimes our games may reinforce stereotypes or biases through the design, content that we use, or representations of characters and scenarios. And we need to be cognizant of that too. Because if the game players feel unrepresented or excluded, the engagement levels will decrease. And then therefore their learning is impacted too. And then another consideration is whether game-based learning is actually aligned to your students' learning styles and preferences. If they are not receptive to this, learning will not be that effective. And then we can all would like to design games, but educated training is necessary too, to understand how to do this and how can it be done. And that can also require resources, but also dedicated time, which becomes quite difficult sometimes. And the last challenge that I would like to cover is games can only cover a certain aspect of content. So limited content coverage becomes something to consider because not all games can cover all the content of a particular module, which could lead to certain gaps in students' knowledge and skill development. And we need to be mindful of those. So that's what I would like to share with you in preparation then for the next two talks. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Riaan.
Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Riaan.
Prof.
No, there are no questions. So Teri-Lynne and Celeste, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Philip, can you share for me, please? I'm going to get Philip to do a little bit of work. I'll tell you when to click. Okay, Philip. So because we're presenting on game-based learning, we thought that one of the ways we could introduce you to a game or a game element was to get you involved. So what I'd like you to do is make sure that you have your keyboards and your fingers ready. And we're going to play a Guess the Emoji game. I'm going to do the first two just to show you what we're doing. And then on the next slide, it'll give you an opportunity to type the answers into the chat box and get some interaction going. So Philip, if you can just click on the first transition. Right, so that's the emoji, and the idea is that you need to guess what that emoji means. So I'm going to tell you the answer just to give you the idea. This particular one is pharmacy. You can click. Thank you. Right, and then just another example before we get started is another emoji, and the answer to this one is sick child. Thank you. Okay, Philip, can we move to the next slide? Now it's up to you as the listeners, participants, to get involved. What do you think the message is or the term is that we are trying to communicate with you through this emoji? Yes, it's looking good. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Some great participation. Thank you, Philip. You can click on the answer. Healthy lifestyle, I think healthy eating, health and wellness, any of those, that's great. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Fantastic. Let's try the next one. Let's see what we get. Emergency services, emergency staff, emergency support. Yes, okay, you can click on the answer for us. First aid or anything related, emergency response. Fantastic. Right, the last one, and then I will move on with our talk. little bit more difficult. Yes, great, Roxanne. Meeting of minds, I like that. Fantastic. Okay, right, let's show the collaborative learning. And I think that game-based learning is a way of learning collaboratively. Riaan has alluded to the team participation and the team aspect of game-based learning. Thank you. You can go to the next slide. So this is just our intro slide. And when we were asked to present on game-based learning, I said to Riaan, we do use game-based learning, but we actually have a module, which is an elective module in our 4th year, where students themselves conduct a project of developing a game for learning. And before I continue, I just want to give recognition to 2 other staff members in our department, Dr. Leah Kritiotis and Mrs. Doina Nordia, who were also part of developing this module up front, although this evening it's just myself and Ms. Nordia that are presenting the module. So what we really are presenting on today is about the module as opposed to actual games that we've implemented, although we will show you some examples of games that we have used in our curriculum. So traditional teaching methods in pharmacy education often face challenges in engaging students and promoting active learning. And game-based learning has emerged as a promising strategy to enhance student involvement and knowledge retention, as Riaan has alluded to. So this presentation introduces this module concept where final year Bachelor of Pharmacy students are tasked with utilizing a game development framework to create games that enhance the teaching of a specific topic within the BPharm curriculum. This is a small group project, and we have, this is our 3rd year that we are running the module, and we've had between 10 and 25 students per year. But it is an elective module, and so students select the module from a list of potential projects. We're going to play a video for you now, which is kind of an introduction and one of the ways in which we motivate students to join this elective, and then I will continue. Thank you, Philip.
The power of game-based learning. Game-based learning is an immersive experience where students master learning targets through gameplay. Unlike a review game, game-based learning introduces new ideas and concepts through a virtual environment. And these games might be online, but they can also be physical and hands-on. The following are 7 benefits of game-based learning. Game-based learning boosts engagement by asking students to make decisions, pursue a goal, and check their own progress. And when this happens, the information sticks and students have a higher retention level of the content. These immersive games can help students make connections between the concepts and the ideas and see learning as interconnected. Here, students bridge the abstract and the concrete. It's a way to teach concepts and systems that might seem opaque and distant in a way that is visual and experiential. In some cases, they take on specialized roles and build empathy with characters. With game-based learning, information is more accessible because students at all levels can participate in the process. There's a low barrier of entry. When this happens, students engage in critical thinking, especially in the debrief process that happens after the game. But there's something else. Games are fun. And when students engage in game-based learning, they begin to fall in love with the subject and the content and the ideas. They realize that it is intrinsically rewarding to geek out on learning. And that takes them one step closer to being lifelong learners.
Thank you, Philip. I think in the interest of time, we can skip over the next slide. I think the video is self-explanatory and really just adds on to what Riaan has already spoken about. So as far as our module is concerned, the primary goal is to introduce the concept of the pharmacist and the pharmacist's role as a teacher. Often we think of teachers as just being academics, but we're wanting to get across to our students that you continue to be a teacher even in the workplace. Many of in our health professions, we're required to supervise students on the work-based learning platform. And so there is teaching them as a pharmacist working in the workplace, you are still a teacher. You're a mentor, you may be a preceptor. And so really it's getting them to explore their role as a teacher and how to integrate elements of game-based learning into the way they maybe educate students in whatever context they find themselves in. And so, as I've mentioned, the students work together in small groups to explore learning theories. And I'm so glad that Riaan spoke a little bit on learning theories, because learning theories is one of the theory lectures we do with this group of students. And it's so important depending on the purpose of the game that you're developing. You know, why am I developing this game? What am I wanting the student to get out of it? And that's identifying the learning theory helps to know what type of game you want to develop. So we introduce the students to a game design framework referred to as the MDA framework, Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. And they use this framework then to develop a game. Now, the elective module is in fact called, it's meant to be a research project, but it's called, it's a coursework. It has coursework elements, so there are theory lectures, and then there's a small project that they have to do. But because we've got such a limited time with our students, we try and circumvent needing human ethics approval. So one of the weaknesses of the module itself is that we can't test out the games that the students have created. So what happens is they use the MDA framework essentially as their methodology, and then the results that are reported as the game that has been created. We also use a learning management system called Moodle at our university. I'm sure you are familiar with some kind of learning management system, if it's not Moodle itself. And on Moodle, we have a very interactive module guide and lessons that the student has to go through. And for each lesson that they go through on Moodle, we've gamified the Moodle site to present the student with a badge after every completed lesson. So just another way that we've kind of integrated gamification into the module itself. The module component, they attend general research-related theory lectures in the first semester, as well as attending theory lectures relevant to the topic. And I will go through just a few of those on the next slide. And then they are required to reflect on those theory lectures as their role as a pharmacist as teacher. They do some interactive quizzes, which Ms. Naude will give you some examples of. They are required to write a research proposal and defend that proposal, present their game concept, and finally they write a project report. Thanks, Philip. Sorry, I'm talking away and I'm forgetting to tell you to move along. Next one, thank you. There's a slide missing. Can you go back one? Oh, okay, we've just removed the slide altogether. No worries. It was really just a slide telling you what some of the theory topics were. So I'll just tell you, obviously we do learning theories and styles. We also look at the history of games and the role of a pharmacist as teacher. And then one of the very important topics that we included is culture and games, recognizing that our students come from a diverse diverse cultures, and that their experience of games is not necessarily the same as another student. And so really just interrogating culture and games, and then introducing this idea of game-based learning and gamification. And then we also touch on digital versus non-digital games in our theory topics, and that kind of gives the students the basis of then being able to come up with their own game concept and then move forward in terms of developing their game for the project. So I'm going to hand over now to Ms. Naude. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Philip, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to start off with just some examples of games that we've used in the module. So the first time we sort of used games was with the pharmacy technician program. We had a game based on 30 seconds, which taught them general terminology and sort of pharmacy jargon. We also had for our integrated prac between the technicians and pharmacy second year students, we had a game using Who Wants to Be a Millionaire to teach them the scopes of practices and the differences and where referral was necessary. And then each year we have a student society does an amazing race where the first years have to run around campus and go to different venues and places that are important for their academic career and just become familiar with campus, and also an icebreaker where they can get to know each other. We've amended that one slightly, and we actually use it in the game-based learning module where they have to go to different places on campus, and there's a QR code, which when they scan the QR code, there's questions based on the theory lectures, which we've gone, which they've been taught. You can go to the next slide. I'll get it. The next 3 slides are just examples of some of the games that, well, all the games that we've had so far. There were 5 in 2022 and 3 last year. And then the next 3 slides, I will go into a little bit more detail. Philip, if you can just go back one quickly. So the first game that we had was one based on pharmacodynamics. It was called Pharmopoly and based on Monopoly. We'll look at that in a bit more detail soon. Then there was one on enhancing clinical knowledge of asthma. So it was based on quiz questions, sort of an original game with a time element, asking questions related to asthma. We then had an interesting take on snakes and ladders, where it was a way of understanding and revising antibiotic classes. So if you got the question right, you'd move up the snake or ladder, and if you had it wrong, you'd have to move down. Next slide. Then we had one that was based on code names. So you have a board for the players and a board for the team or the master. That one was students recognized that they learn in theory all about the active pharmaceutical ingredient, but when they do their work-based learning, they don't always know the trade names. So this was a game to highlight and get familiar with trade names. And then we had one team that chose to do a digital game, which was based on an awareness of how to dispose of pharmaceutical or medical waste. This one was planned to get harder with each level. So it started with a word search, and then it went into anagram, and then it went into multiple choice, which I'm not quite sure they reached what they were aiming for there, but it was a good way of sort of reiterating the same information on different platforms. Next slide. So last year we had 3 games. It was Cardio Quest, which was revision of the cardiovascular care. Psycholike, which is a game on antipsychotics used in the public sector. And then PRX, which is a game based on code names for, sorry, not code names, I've forgotten the name now, but the one where you have something on your forehead and other people have to guess what it was. So on directions for over-the-counter pain medicine. If you can go on to the next slide, I've just got a little bit more information on 3 of those games. So the Pharmopoly was, this group went to a lot of trouble to make a game that was very closely based on Monopoly. They had all kinds of things where you had to pay registration fees to council and registering the license for pharmacy. And then you had small independent pharmacies with like a house, and a large corporate pharmacy was like a hotel. And they had 2 decks of cards, which was either a multiple choice question or a long question. So a lot of work had gone into it, but unfortunately a little bit like Monopoly, it's very tedious and long-winded, and the engagement wasn't as great just with them playing with themselves, and obviously also presenting it to us as the lecturers. So I'll talk about that in our learning points. The next slide, Philip. This one was a take on 30 seconds. It's the Psycholike. So they had 2 categories, either pink or blue, depending on which one you fell. The pink one was focused on the drag, and then you describe different indications for that drag. And the blue ones were focused on the indications and just the definition of what that indication was. And then the last one of the game examples. Cardio Quest. This was the one on cardio care. They also had similar, they had a slightly longer time than 30 seconds, but depending on what color you fell, you got to pick a different color card. They all had the drug name, indication, and mechanism of action. And then depending on the color, it was either contraindications, adverse effects, or interactions. Yeah, so those are examples of what our students came up with. And the next slide is just giving acknowledgement to the 8 groups and their names. So you can just flick over that one quickly for me. Thank you. And then the last 2 slides is lessons learned from the games. I think the Pharmapilli one was a very vivid sort of example of less is more. The more complicated or time-wise longer the game took, it was sort of less engagement, or students tend to become bored faster. Also, the next picture is the keys, and trying all the keys, and then you find the last one's the one that works. Very often with designing the games, I think it taught a lot of critical thinking, coming up with new ideas, thinking about how they're going to, the 3 mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics, and how they would use those 3 things to meet the objective of the game. And in the last little picture, just the key to all of this is that it was fun, because you need the students to engage in order for them to be able to learn. The last slide. This was just, as Teri-Lynne alluded to, the ethics is probably one of the biggest barriers, so we couldn't actually test the game. It was more testing or applying the MDA framework as a methodology to design and create the game. So if you think about it, is honors level students, it's their first real experience with research, and it doesn't really fit the mold of the ask a question hypothesis. There's no collection of data, no analysis of results, but rather using the MDA framework to then have the game as your result. So that is a little bit difficult in trying to reinforce the research elements. But the last picture is an area which is growing a lot. There's a lot of interest coming to that platform, and I think that brings with it a lot of opportunities. There's some funding opportunities and also opportunities for collaboration, not just within pharmacy, but also interprofessional education. And I think it's an exciting space to be in. And I think there's a lot of wealth of knowledge which still can be found in the game-based learning arena. So the last slide is just saying thank you for your time and questions, but I think we can deal with that as the chairperson sees fit. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Teri-Lynne and Celeste. I think we can move over to Daniel, and then at the end, maybe there are a few comments and comments in the chat box that we can then address. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Firstly, thank you very much for having me for this opportunity. I know we are a little bit short of time, so I'll try to go quickly. My short share that I want to do is on a case study that we did. So an example case of how we used game-based learning in one of our second-year modules. And we did a interprofessional education collaboration with the second-year nursing students. So it was second-year EMC students along with second-year nursing students. And using the tools that we've got on Moodle LMS and a tool that is called H5P, it's basically just an integration that is already available for many LMS sites, and in our case for Moodle. So with game-based learning, with the idea on the topic of teaching diabetes management, and more specifically, so in the greater topic of endocrine emergencies, the key outcome for this game, call it, or for this intervention, was that students should just have a practice and engage with the learning material. So they already have received a lecture. They have got the online learning material that they can go through the PowerPoint. And then the main outcomes was very simple, so very basic, just identifying an emergency. In this case, it was hypoglycemia, to differentiate between low and high blood sugar, and just the management of a patient in a diabetic coma. So I see somebody has made a comment there. It's difficult to get ethics. So this pilot project, we did actually put it through ethics application, and we got it. And I presented a poster presentation at our SAAHE conference last year in 2023 that we hosted here at Nelson Mandela University. And the response rate from the students was very good. So 88% of them found this game or the intervention to be very beneficial, and we had very good feedback. So with that, here's some screenshots of just how the game looks on the inside. So with the idea of having a branching scenario, the students are presented with a video where they get dispatched to a call, and you play the role as a first person, which in this case is a ECP paramedic, for the first part of the simulation, of the online simulation, where they go and engage with the patient virtually. And then in the second part of the game, the role changes, where they are now actually playing the role as a nursing practitioner. So the game structure overview was for both the ECP paramedic as well as for the nurse practitioner, is to go through a bit of a protocol approach to firstly introducing yourself to the patient or to the family member, doing a primary, getting history, doing a secondary, taking vitals, coming up with a provisional diagnosis, and then in this case management of the diabetic coma. So if I can take us quickly back, then I can show you just how the site that we set up looks. So on Moodle, it's just a simple categories that we put up, and then if you go into the simulation game, there's some instructions, and then when you click on start new game, I'll just show you the first bit of how it actually looks. So you can make it full screen. This is the first window that they see. So they get their dispatch information, and then the first video comes up. And then it goes on and on and on. But to show you, sorry for this quickly. See my screen here. I just want to show you the back end of how the branching scenario looks. So in Moodle, you have a tree structure, a tree approach, where you take the student through all the steps that you want, all the interactions, to a point where they have to make a decision. And then you continue, and you can add as many branching questions as you like. So you can see in some of these cases, there is 2 options, and then only one of the options is correct. They can get feedback. Here's an example of where there's 4 options. You can see what option 1, 2, 3, and 4 is incorrect. Try again. And then when they get the correct option, then only the scenario for the game continues. So it might look like a lot, and I'll be honest, it is quite a lot, but this whole setup can take the student about 15 to 30 minutes to complete. And what we found was as expected, the engagement with the learning material was very good. And that's kind of one of the things that you want to achieve with an intervention like using game-based learning in your teaching and in your online teaching in this case. The students can practice it as many times as they want. They get immediate feedback, and it's a safe environment. So meaning they can make mistakes, and they can try again. And in that, they learn. So yeah, that's it from my side. I think for the sake of time, I'll just keep it short to that. Thank you, Prof, and thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and also our other 3 presenters. There are only 2 comments. The one was about the ethics, and Daniel, thank you for telling us about the ethics. And then from Gerda Vinter, who said that she has used anatomy versions of 30 seconds and some others students enjoy, but she has learned that these activities should be short, completed within 15 minutes, if it's part of a practical. So, and I see she gets, she got a few thumbs up and a little heart from our presenters. Your feedback in terms of length, and Daniel alluded to how long it take to develop a game. Any comments, Riaan, Celeste, Teri-Lynne?
Prof, I think that it depends on the game itself. I've used 30 seconds to teach terminology, where they're given the term and they've got to explain the term without obviously using the term itself. And it's quite a full board, and I've been able to go for a full hour with students doing that in pharmacy practice in a very, very, very noisy classroom. So I think it depends on the game. I think that one of the challenges we found, as Ms. Naude alluded to, was the complexity of the game. So even 30 seconds for someone that doesn't know how to play it, explaining the rules and getting them started can take a little while. So for me, I think the simplicity of the game is important, particularly if your students come from a background, in the case of board games, where board games were not necessarily part of their childhood. So yeah, I'll let my other colleagues contribute.
Any comments from Riaan or from Celeste or Daniel?
Prof, Riaan, yeah. So it depends for me on the year of students. So the first is would like to play the game for the entire 70 minutes because the one team didn't win and they want to do it again because they want to win. So I don't mind, I let them do it because then they learn important concepts. But like Teri-Lynne said, depends how difficult the game is. I did find, like she said, if the students have a previous background with that particular game, they are more excited to do it because they know how it works. But then they can also help others understand it better from a practical sense without taking them through the whole set of rules. So then students start helping each other learn the game as well in a quicker manner. Yeah, so that was my experiences.
So that means it's also team building exercise for the students, which is very important.
Correct.
So yeah, Teri-Lynne?
Sorry, something that we maybe didn't mention is just a small reward. So, you know, for the 30 seconds, when a team got to the end of the board, the winning team got like, you know, a sucker, and maybe the losing team got smaller sweets or something like that. So, you know, I don't tend to use game-based learning for assessment marks. It's a way to use or game-based learning used as assessment, or not as assessment so much as learning. So, you know, although the format of a lot of the games is question and answer and comes across as assessment, I don't use that towards the assessment marks. But there's some kind of reward, and in this case, sweets or suckers or chocolates. When we do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, everyone that volunteers to come up and answer some of the questions, I give them some kind of sweet reward. And then at the end, the person that wins the $1 million generally gets those millionaire shortbread from Woolworths, just as a reward. So it's something that we didn't mention, but something that I also include, and that motivates participation as well.
Thanks, Teri-Lynne. I see in the comments also from Karin Marks, I had the same feedback, players want the reward. And yeah, also called Bloemfontein. Any further comments or questions to our presenters first?
Sorry, Prof. Teri-Lynne, I don't have a comment, but I was wondering, Gerda made some interesting comments specifically about the anatomy focus. So I wonder if we can give her an opportunity just to voice over some of the comments that she made, if that's okay. I found that quite interesting.
That's a good idea. Gerda, please talk to us.
Good evening, everybody. So I have to admit, I'm still very new when it comes to game-based learning. In fact, towards the end of the last year, I started with a course for healthcare sciences. So it's physiotherapy, occupational therapy, nursing, all together in anatomy. And I had a class of over 200 students. And I had to accommodate them for practicals in anatomy, which are compulsory to attend. So I started working out stations, and technically I didn't have enough space to accommodate everybody. So I had to find activities to keep the students busy, but still be part and relevant of the anatomy. So I started out with some crossword puzzles in the beginning. They didn't like it the first time round, but then I realized, hey, spelling is the issue there. So we started practicing anatomical terminology, which is also very important. Later with some word searches. And then I started bringing out the new things, because those excitement and that absolute chaos that I then caused in those practicals, loved it, by the way, showed me that they really had a lot of fun. So I started with matching games, for example, muscle matching. And as this whole presentation is going on tonight, I'm actually cutting out cards in preparation for my practical for tomorrow on this. I made, for example, images and laminated them all on skeletal muscles. I made little name cards for them, say, for example, nerve supply cards for them. And then the students need to sort them out, for example, per group of muscle first, then their nerve supply. They love these things. I started then playing around with Heads Up, the game where you need to, normally it's electronically played with a phone, but because we do most of the things card-based, I printed out little cards with nervous system terms for Heads Up. And then what happens, it's just the opposite from 30 seconds. The group needs to explain it to the person who picked up the card, who then needs to guess it. And this also works a lot of fun, the students. What else? Oh, I've used a lot of things in the meantime. I've started working on a snakes and ladders version game. That one will be deployed in about 2 weeks' time. Roll of the dice. I'm actually starting to make a deck of cards actually in anatomy as well. But the whole thing that I need to keep in mind the entire time and remind myself, because I do get a lot excited a lot about all of this, is that there must be some sort of learning of anatomy and referring back to the anatomy content that we did for that particular week. So it's fun to play a card game or something, but it must test their knowledge in a fun, interactive way. Now, I have to be honest, I do make them fill in reflection assignments towards the end of every module. And I've had about 3 students out of 500 that I've had since I've started all of this that have told me, listen, this is not fun. The rest of them all's like, we love this. This is so much fun. And especially if I bring it in revision sessions towards the end of a module and I put it out for students then to informally play, don't limit them with times like with the other practicals. I can see it really helps them a lot. In fact, some of them even requested that I share my games with them. So that's what I've got to say so far on this.
Oh, very interesting, and thank you very much for sharing. You make us very excited and very curious. I think we are slightly over time, but we also started slightly late. Jade, Clara, you posted a comment for your Masters in Nursing. Don't you want in 3 minutes to quickly also just very briefly tell us? Thank you, Gerda.
Good evening, everyone. So I just completed my master's study and we actually made a virtual reality game where we selected newly qualified nurses and they were presented with a virtual patient and we used the Oculus Quest headsets. They were presented with a patient that had hypertensive crisis. So the patient actually told them or gave them history of what they were experiencing. And throughout the game, they were provided with a chest x-ray, arterial blood gases, ECGs, where they actually had to perform the ECG themselves on the virtual patient. And only once they put the leads in the correct places did the ECG come up on the information board provided. They were also allowed to use a digital stethoscope to listen for heart sounds, breath sounds, in order to assist them to make a nursing diagnosis. They were given patient medication to help them or to test them on their pharmacological aspect of nursing. And then once they were given a few minutes to review all the objective and subjective data, they were required after interacting to write down their nursing diagnosis and also the nursing interventions that they felt were appropriate for the patient that they were presented with. So it was the feedback from the candidates was obviously very positive. A lot of them even suggested that we use it in our OSCE, so that is our clinical practicals that we have with the students, because they felt that it would take a lot of the stress out of their assessments. And a lot of using the virtual reality games or prototypes, you actually can allow the student to interact and you can be in a different room and via Wi-Fi and recording systems, they can interact, they can upload it, and the lecturer or the preceptor can review it at a later stage or while the student is interacting without having to be with the student themselves. So yeah, that was my master's that we did, and we had a very good outcome from the participants, and they said that they would really enjoy if something like that would be integrated into curriculums. Thank you.
That's very interesting, very inspiring and very interesting. No, thank you for sharing that. Colleagues, I think we're learning so much from each other tonight. I don't want to end the session. We are slightly over time, but I think this can become in the next webinar or at the next conference. One can take this further. So yeah, just a big thank you to all of you. Riaan, before I do the last slide, any last word from you, your wisdom?
I think those that's new to game-based learning shouldn't be scared to try something out. If you get your students buy-in, they're always up for something new, especially if they don't have to listen to us all the time, talking to them. And you can start small. You don't have to do big things. Start small and then you build your repertoire over time. And then, yeah, reach out to those that you know have done it, and we can all give some prompts and ideas and then take it from there.
Thank you so much. Teri-Lynne, one sentence, a last word of wisdom, followed by Celeste, followed by Daniel, and then I will show, Philip will please show the last slide, and then we finish.
Now you've put me on the spot, Prof. Yeah, I can't agree enough with Riaan. Just start somewhere. No matter how small. I don't have time to develop a game for my next prac, and so I've created this. It's looking at rashes and differential diagnosis, and it's getting this one group of students to create questions for differential diagnosis with answers, and then testing another group with that using a rash graphic. So, just start somewhere. You don't need a lot of resources. Just use what you've got available to you, and it doesn't have to be expensive either.
Thank you, Teri-Lynne. Celeste, briefly.
Fun. The key is fun. It's got to be engaging.
Thank you. That's short and sweet, but I think, yeah, that is spot on. Daniel, from your side, last.
Thank you, Prof. I think, yeah, like Teri-Lynne said, and Celeste, just start, just do it. When I started exploring this concept, I had no prior training. I was teaching myself via YouTube. I was just reading up. It was during the COVID times, so we had some more time. Not that we really ever have got time, but I'm really glad that I took that steps, and I would really encourage anyone else to also just do it. There can be a lot of planning that can go into a project, and yeah, how did I put it? Paralysis analysis. Whereas it's sometimes good to just do it, and then you learn as you go. And then with these online things, and then also like Celeste and Teri-Lynne shared, having board games, you create it once, and then it's content created that you can reuse and reuse and reuse. So yeah, that's from me. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much. Yes, I see fun is the key ingredient, and I see baby steps. Philip, will you be able to just quickly share the very last screen for us? So colleagues, a big thank you for tonight, and we want to introduce tonight or announce tonight that the next webinar, our third one, is on the 18th of September, same time. And it is going to be, the topic is State of Interprofessional Education, IPE in Eastern Cape Universities. And it is going to be, it is under construction at the moment, but we're going to involve the different Eastern Cape universities in this discussion. And then our last webinar for the year will be in November. The exact date is not yet cast in stone. But that last one in November, we're going to have a panel discussion, also all 4 universities involved on AI. And then we're going to, the same evening, we're also going to have our annual general meeting for our chapter. That date will be published or made available as soon as we've decided or fixed the date. So please, if you're available, pencil now already in your diary. The evening of the 18th of September, Wednesday evening, 18:30, for State of IPE in our Eastern Cape universities. Colleagues, with that, I want to thank you all. In the background, Philip, thank you always, as always. A big thank you for all your assistance. And colleagues, thank you for joining us tonight. And yes, let us carry on and do the good work in health professions education in our beautiful country. With that, I am saying good night to all of you, and have a good week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.